Yes, yes, everybody. Rush and the West End Network, hope you're all safe and well. If you're new and give a like, comment, give a share, give a subscribe. It is back. My morning musings back in the office in central London. How depressing from my lovely holiday. Um, but obviously, we're in the midst of the transfer window, and Anton did a really, I think it was last week. He asked me to do a little video of why what I do with Caduce and whether you keep or sell him or things like that. And there's some um, really interesting things within the comments section about selling Caduce and things like that. And the topic of the musing today is about when's right to sell a player. And I think to be fair, in the last 10 years, I think there's only one player we've sold at the right time, and that's been Declan Rice. I think every other player we tend to sell them a season too late. And there's a balancing act. There's a balancing act between selling and keeping to then progress the club, and I get that totally. And I think there's certain parameters. I think with the Caduce situation, for me there was always going to be a West Ham as a stepping stone. And if and that is from a pragmatic perspective, not from a oh, I love West Ham, because I do love West Ham. I've supported West Ham all my life, but the fact is we're not as big as other clubs. That's fair enough. We know, and the way I saw the Caduce move, considering as part of the negotiations, there was a minimum release clause within that, which is at a certain time and place, and if someone's going to stay forever, they're not going to ask for those types of things put in the contract. Simples. And so, for some players, there is a stepping stone. West Ham is a stepping stone, particularly if they're coming in from abroad, using West Ham stepping out and moving on. You're seeing it now. Brentford and Brian Mbeumo. He's basically said, "I want to go to Man United." That was always his end goal. He's taken a few more, maybe about a season, 18 months longer than he should have done, but that's always his sort of his end goal for that. So. And I don't think and I understand that, footballers, I think we as fans, there's we see fans play leaving from one club to another, and that's a disgrace, but actually it's moving from one job to another, it's one company to another. And, I think sometimes, we see things with our heart instead of our head. And that's epidemic of modern football in itself, the marketing, the way things are promoted. But, so I think it's about sort of assessing. It is on a case-by-case basis. I mean, even look at the academy players. So, with the potential exception maybe of a Divine and Balmer, I think the club do well in terms of when to release players, when to not renew their contract. So we've seen it recently with Cam Schweier. I think he'd hit his ceiling at West Ham. In all honesty, he wasn't going to break into the first team. He wasn't. He's not good enough. He wasn't good enough to break into the first team, and that's no slight on him. 97% of all Premier League academy players never make 1 minute of academy football, of Premier League football, which is a crazy statistic. But so in a weird way, we've done quite well. We've had a few in recent times make at least a couple of minutes of Premier League football. But Divine, maybe you might see him go to Ipswich. To replace Liam Delap, and we got £2 million basically for Divine, not us. Well, him deciding not, and it wasn't necessarily us leaving. It's him deciding not to sign the new terms of his contract. The contract was there, but he didn't want to sign it. He wanted to go to Man City. He made a couple of appearances. I think arguably, if he was at West Ham, he probably would have made a dozen appearances maybe in the Premier League last year, based on injuries and things like that. And that's another thing. Everything's a gamble. When it comes to whether you keep a player, whether you let a player go, everything's a gamble. Even when you buy a player as well, Christ, arguably someone like Caduce, his stock was probably the highest last summer. Last season was a poor season for West Ham, and vis-a-vis a poor season for Caduce. He gets put into that same boat, and where last summer, I think you'd have probably had clubs clambering to get him. I think he's still he's still our sort of greatest commodity in terms of our players, but maybe not to the ferocity or the fever that he had last summer. And I agree. I agree to a certain extent, saying we should be selling, we should be keeping our these best players. But it's true. And I agree. But for something like Kudus, I think there is a situation where West Ham was always going to be a short-term deal, so to speak, with the bigger prize going to one of the clubs who are going to be competing with the Premier League, proverbially competing for the Premier League, if he stays in the Premier League, or if not, one of them big European sides. If by all accounts, he doesn't want to go to Saudi Arabia, which I respect. If that's true or not, we'll see when someone offers him £500,000 a week or whatever, 400 grand a week or whatever John Duran's on. Makes it a little bit different because it is a job. It is a job. If someone offered me a lot more money to the same job I'm doing now, probably easier than I'm doing now, I would probably say yes, because it's a job. But I think I think looking at some of the play, some like, I mean, case in point, Mikel Antonio. I'm not using Mikel as a direct example, but example of a gamble. You could buy a player, or indeed you could refuse, turn down offers for a player. The next day, they could crash the car and potentially not have a career in football ever again. So you really have to sort of calculate the risk with these types of things, in my opinion. So, someone like Kudus, yes, he's a fantastic. On his day, he's a fantastic player. I don't think he had the great season last year. As you said, it may be a factor of him not playing in the right position, possibly. But the fact is, when he did play in the right position, I didn't think he was as effective as he was on the left-hand side. That's just my opinion. I think particularly if he goes to a bigger club, he's going to be even more pigeonholed into a particular role. He's not going to be given the keys to the castle. He's going to be coming in to do a job, a role. But then again, by selling Kudus, you're selling one of our most creative players, or one of the most effective, attacking players. Which I could produce particularly creative. He's very raw. He's very quick. He's very fast. I wouldn't say he sees a 30-yard pass and dinks it over. Not at all. He's very, he's impactful. And I worry that him going would leave a big hole in terms of that impact. But my concern is as well is, if we sold him for 80 million, 85 million, for example, next summer he might have another poor season. He might only be 50 million, and then you've lost. Actually, it could even be less because his contract will be even there, and then you've lost a lot of money on that, which could have been reinvested for the next 3-4 years rather than the short term of keeping him for another season. The flip side is he could stay and become the Premier League the top goal scorer next season and fire us into the Champions League. He could do. And if me auntie had bollocks, she'd be my uncle. And that's the calculated risk you take. And that's why I think traditionally we've been very poor at selling. I think we've been very poor at buying sometimes, but we've been very poor in selling, holding on players for far too long, which is a reason why we had, for the last couple of years, one of the oldest squads in the Premier League. The likes of Aaron Cresswell. You've got to think in terms of collectively, we've got rid of Cresswell at 30, well, say mid-30s, Fabianski late 30s, almost. Well, he's just turned 40, isn't he? So that's 75 years, for example. Kudus is not Kudus. Soufal's 32, so that's 102 years, something like that. Danny Ings is 32, I think, as well. So 135 years. Zuma's got to be 30 as well. So when you combine all that, we probably got rid of about 160 years worth of player, which would massively impact our squad average age. And to be fair, the likes of Cresswell, Fabianski, we could have got rid of 18 months, 2 years ago, potentially. Yes, in hindsight, Cresswell's come in and still done a job for us when needed. Yes, Fabianski has done a sterling job for us over the years. And Soufal's come in and played an important part as well, as and when required last season. But it just, everything is perfect when you look at it from hindsight. Kudus, we could sell Kudus tomorrow, and he could go and play for Ghana internationals, and if I don't know if the internationals are in, I don't know, and then he could tear his cruciate ligament and be out for a whole season. Could be. If we don't sell him, then we've got an £85 million hole in our budget. If we do sell him, then we can then reinvest that money in a player who could get injured as well. I mean, even the players that we're being linked with are getting injured already. Yuri Alberto, Jan Bizek. I mean, these guys have been got injured just being linked to West Ham, which is quite impressive. I think sometimes we football is it's a very emotive game, and I think sometimes, which is what I do, and everyone's entitled to it. I step back a bit and look at it from the bigger picture. That's just me. I've always done that, and I do it at work as well. I don't necessarily look at the short. I look at the bigger plan. But the fact is, in football, it is about the short term. It is. If Graham Potter doesn't win his first, if we're bottom after 10 games next season, Potter's out. That's the way it works. That's the way football works. It is short term. It is, you're only as good as your last result. So there is a balancing act needed. But I think proverbially we've been very poor when we sell. We don't sell at the right times. We don't, we hold on to players for too long, whether it's sentimentality, whether the fact that no fucker wants them maybe as well. That could be a point. It's really, it's something we need to improve on. It is. I mean, a case in point. I mean, you look at, again, Brentford. Brentford's a good case in point. Flecken looks like he's going to, I think, buy Leverkusen, I think it is. Then they reinvest that money and bring in, looks like Kelleher. And, that to me is a very, very good bit of business. But the same way, it looks like Brian Mbeumo's going. So if they sell Brian Mbeumo, who are they going to bring in next? Do you know what I mean? And I just think sometimes football fans in general, not just West Ham fans, football fans in general, there'll be a lot of Brentford fans who'll be pissed off with Brian Mbeumo leaving. Some will be like, fair enough. We're not Man United, although they finished a bit higher than Man United, but they're not the marketing juggernaut, the £1 billion club or whatever it is that is Man United. World renowned, everyone in the world knows Man United. I just think sometimes, and again, I was looking back at some of those, there was a lot of interesting comments in that sort of keep or sell Kudus. And I think some were like, yeah, it makes perfect sense to sell our best player. And I understand that. I do understand that. It makes no logical sense. But in the same way, if you've got a player who doesn't want to be there, the detrimental effect he has on the team is vastly greater than him being there, him not being there rather. And again, we are sort of what's the word? We are open to what's been discussed and what's been publicised in the news. And again, who runs that narrative of those stories being leaked? If a story came out today, it was, like the Brian Mbeumo story, we don't know if Brian does want to go to Man United. It's just what's been reported. We don't know whether Kudus does want to leave. We don't know whether Kudus really doesn't want to go to the Saudi Pro League. It's only what's been promoted and what's been publicised in terms of the articles, in terms of the ITKs, in terms of the gossip pages. But we're all very capable human beings of making rational decisions and wading our way through the bullshit and seeing what has validity, what doesn't have validity. I don't need to speak. I don't need to tell you that. You're not a fucking idiot. That's why we do the Russyb rating. We don't say we've been linked to almost 100 players already. We're not going to sign 100 players. That's fucking 5 Premier League squads worth of players. But that's why we go through it, and that's why we talk about this and that and this and that, and give our thoughts and our opinions. Would they be a good fit, in our humble opinion, or not? That's our thing. Anyway, that's enough for me rambling on today. Keep an eye on the channel as per usual. Don't forget to give it a like, give it a comment, give it a share. Over the next sort of few weeks or so, what we're going to be doing is doing sort of spot daily prizes, so to speak, for people who are commenting. So maybe once or twice a week, maybe a bit long, maybe 3 or 4 times a week. And we'll announce that. We're not just going to say yesterday, oh, top prize. Actually, we might do actually, 'cause that'd be quite fun. We'll also have the Palo di Canio raffle shirt that will come out later this week, and we'll also have the Mark Noble signed shirt with football prizes. That's available on their website. I think there's another day left on that as well. Also, but anyway, take care, everyone. Stay safe, stay warm, stay humble, keep the faith, and I'll see you soon. Much love, motherfuckers. Bye.